The effects of the global pandemic were, of course, felt immediately, but they'll also have long-term consequences. In many cases, they've just fast-forwarded a pathway that we were already on in terms of the changing nature of the way that we live and work, exposing flaws in our economic model, shining a light on the fragility of our health and social care system, and perhaps exposing how we've not planned effectively for dealing with a crisis or an emergency. Of course, there'll be significant long-term effects on our future generations. Future generations have suffered considerably as a result of this pandemic. Loss of schooling and education, loss of social connection, increase in challenges with mental health, and on an ongoing basis, they're likely to be seriously impacted upon by downturn in the economy and a move into recession. Already, they're doing less well than their parents and their grandparents. And that's because many of the ways in which we take decisions don't take into account the needs of future generations. Quite frankly, in many cases, we've been bad ancestors. But if anything, this pandemic exposes that and gives us an opportunity to reset and reevaluate how we meet the needs of our future generations. To do that, however, governments need a framework within which to operate, a framework which doesn't focus on panic decision making, which often takes us back to old ways of working or business as usual. It needs to seize the opportunities that have been exposed as a result of this pandemic, and it needs to be focused on addressing fragilities in our system. Fragilities around different ways of working, people who are in uncertain employment, often the lower income and those living in poverty. The fact that we haven't adequately planned for an ageing population, the fact that we still are not taking the action that we should be taking to address the climate and nature emergencies. So whilst the new ways of living and working in terms of the pandemic, increased home working, decreases in travel, changes to the way that people are purchasing, a sense of people embracing community, buying local, using the foundational economy. All of those things need now to be baked into a recovery. A recovery must be seeking to ensure that it is a clean and green recovery, that it focuses on addressing long-term inequalities, and that it's not baking in problems of the past into the direction that we take in the future. To do that, we need holistic decision making. We can talk about economic stimulus in green industries, and that's excellent, absolutely the way that we need to be going. But if we focus on those green industries where jobs predominantly go to already well-off white men, rather than focusing on addressing inequality gaps in terms of gender, in terms of race, we'll be baking in inequality in the way that we go forward. If we're not thinking about how we address the needs of an ageing population in terms of how our health and social care systems will manage not just with this pandemic but into the future, then we will be disadvantaging future generations who may not have any form of health and social care system, anything like we've got at the moment. If we're not thinking about decisions holistically with an aim to get towards a world that we want to see and a world that we would be proud to leave behind to future generations, then we will have taken nothing or learnt nothing from this pandemic. In Wales, a small nation as part of the UK, we are the only country in the world that has legislated to protect the interests of future generations and legislated to set out our national mission, our national goals for the Wales we want to leave behind to future generations based on the UN Sustainable Development Goals. This means that we need to look holistically at the things we do. We need to build back in a way which is going to address multiple issues. Investing in housing, low carbon housing, for example, helps to meet our decarbonisation targets. It helps to tackle poverty. It helps to improve people's health. It can help to provide jobs in the foundational economy and rebuild our communities. Those are the sorts of solutions that we need to be looking for, and governance needs to embrace an approach which requires us to plan for the long term, which requires us to prevent problems from occurring, to think holistically in an integrated way, and sets out a vision for the Wales and the world that we want to leave behind. I'd encourage you to look at our groundbreaking legislation, which provides that framework in Wales and could provide a blueprint for the way that the world builds back better post-coronavirus.